Welcome, everyone. Alhamdulillah to this collaboration, this webinar with Dr. Abdallah Rothman, Ramadan and Regulation. We have people joining from all over, subhanAllah. So if anybody wants to share, where you're coming in from, just do a quick, just minute or two and then get started because I want to give space for Dr. Abdullah Rothman to share as much as possible from his knowledge. So where are you joining from? What's your background? What are your credentials? Most all individuals here are in mental health care. Looks like we've got New Jersey, some more New Jersey. I'm joining from California. Los Angeles, oh, another one, the UK, Toronto, Canada. Alhamdulillah, Muslim mental health is present and alive all over the world. And alhamdulillah, this field has become one where we historically maybe had to borrow a lot, but leaning back into our Islamic tradition, we have so many resources available to us, and we're so excited to be able to host Dr. Abdullah today, where he'll share a little bit more from his end. We are, hosting alongside with Dr. Abdallah, the Ruh platform. We are an online therapy platform that provides, Ruh is an online therapy platform that provides services and therapy, insurance-based and financial assistance-based to clients from all around the world, but primarily based in Canada and the US. We have Islamically aligned and trusted resources, so not just therapists who maybe are Muslim and happen to be therapists, but people who are Muslim first therapists, clinicians who are Muslim first therapists, who are able to offer therapy in 17 and growing languages with culturally responsive care. And it's just the biggest thing is a focus on accessibility. And so when our clients or when a client reaches out and wants to connect with a therapist, it's very easy for them to be able to click in and find somebody. And so we know with clinicians from all over the world, we often find people will reach out to us. We need to provide a referral resource. And so we hope to be kind of part of that toolbox for you that you can connect with, refer over. And one of the most beautiful things is in the event that somebody on our team isn't available, we also have a very robust Muslim therapist directory, which I hope most of you are a part of. And if not, we'll drop a link for you to sign up for, inshallah. And so if there isn't somebody on our team who's a good fit, it will kind of connect them with the person who is a good fit, inshallah. And so really just the idea is to create accessibility and have these opportunities to really build up true, aligned therapy for Muslims worldwide, that we carry that amana and we do all the work that we do with ihsan. So I do not want to take up any more additional time. I want to go ahead and provide an introduction for Dr. Abdullah Rothman, who, alhamdulillah, has reached out to us to share a little bit more about the Shifaa Method. And today, inshallah, he'll be talking about Ramadan and regulation. Dr. Abdullah Rothman, for those of you who don't know, is a licensed professional counselor and a psychologist who specializes in Islamic psychology and spiritually integrated psychotherapy. He serves as head of Islamic psychology at the Cambridge Muslim College and is the president of International Association of Islamic Psychology. He is the founder and developer of the Shifaa Method, a heart-centered somatic approach to healing rooted in the Islamic model of the human being. For over 2 decades, Dr. Rothman has worked at the intersection of clinical practice, Islamic scholarship, and practitioner training, helping develop a clinically coherent approach to Islamic psychology for therapists and helping professionals. Inshallah, Dr. Abdallah will be providing a talk, and then we will open it up for question and answer. And so if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We'll be working on kind of consolidating them and presenting them to them at the end, inshallah. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Fatima to share.
Jazakallah khair.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the Ruh team and this collaboration and the opportunity to be with you all. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's great to be particularly with people who, inshallah, work with clinician, work with clients in as practitioners, in that oftentimes our orientation to working with people, particularly in the month of Ramadan, can be uh, a different focus when we're focused on this time of spiritual reflection and how we understand that in terms of regulation. So this title, Ramadan and Regulation, often we are looking at what we're doing in the month of Ramadan with regulating our routines, our behaviors, and ultimately trying to regulate our state. And what we can get stuck on sometimes is the vision of what we want to be and where we're trying to get to be at the end of the month of Ramadan. You know, we're always like, I'm gonna read lots of Quran. I'm going to have this month impact me in a way that at the end of the month, I'm going to be different and I'm going to be better. And it's going to change me. And I'm going to do that through regulating my behavior, regulating my food, regulating maybe even my emotions to a certain level. But we're looking at this like as a end point that we're trying to get to. And what we can miss out on, and this is both in Ramadan and as clinicians, what we sometimes are oriented in our clients is trying to help people um, regulate their behavior and their thoughts to produce a different outcome. And what we miss out on is the opportunity to come to ourselves with our hearts vulnerable and opened as they are, and bringing that to Allah directly as we are, and not getting caught on this trying to manipulate and change external factors of ourselves so that we can, with the assumption that that's going to change our internal state. And so what I think is interesting about this month is that, you know, it's often couched as ibadah and more reading of Quran, and we're going to be more spiritual. And yet our vision of spirituality can often be um, marked by how much we're doing. And it's this transactional orientation to doing behaviors and then therefore being better out in some other place. And what we miss out on is actually being and bringing our heart and our soul on a more deeper level of who we are underneath, just as we are, and being able to come in contact with that in a deep level. And so when we do this process of regulating our routines and our behaviors and, you know, changing the way that we eat and changing our schedule during the day, that regulation can change a lot of things. But what it does is it sets up for something to be revealed and exposed. And what we can miss out on is the power and the opportunity in the exposure of the qalb, of the core of who we actually are, without getting kind of preoccupied on trying to change the nafs or change on a more external level who we are and how we are, and look at ourselves of trying to get to this better place, different place. And transformation happens not by necessarily just changing our thoughts and changing our behaviors, but actually recognizing and witnessing where we're at, what our state is, along with those thoughts and behaviors, and being able to fully allow them to come forward, to then bring those to Allah and be in submission with what is present. But when we're focused on regulating ourselves, changing our behavior, we are often doing this bypassing where we're trying to skip ahead. And the transformation comes through being with what is and being with Allah. This is the sort of saying that a lot of my work is centered around. And the therapeutic method that I've developed is based around this notion of be with what is and be with Allah. Because often we're trying to get over, we're trying to get around, we're trying to become something, and we're missing the doorway to actually for transformation. And so the key here, both for our orientation to our spiritual practice in this month of Ramadan, as well as our work with clients, is not trying to fix and not trying to um, only be focused on regulating the self, but actually that the regulating the self really exposes the self that we're trying to regulate. And that self is not just on the surface level of our thoughts and our behavior, but the spiritual content of what oftentimes we cover over that's in our um, bodies and in the core of our being. And when we just kind of deal with what am I doing and what am I thinking, that can be a way of bypassing. Even sometimes when we're allowing our emotions to be seen, but we're allowing them to be seen in a place that's like still trying to change the patterns. Like, so even work in like EFT, emotional focused therapy, we can be allowing those emotions to come up, but still trying to have them be more adaptive, right? So the focus is on change through technique rather than change through submission. That actually the transformation is from Allah moving us to where our potential is rather than us being self-directed, both as our individual selves oriented to our own personal growth, as well as practitioners helping people guide them to their growth. And so it becomes this interesting almost paradox in that the way towards true transformation is actually can feel like stillness or not doing and not fixing or not applying technique, but it's in this very genuine way of getting in touch with the core um, nature of our being and being able to open that and witness. So if we have pain, rather than trying to do the things that are going to help that pain feel better or help the process be more adaptive to how we deal with it, it's actually really being real with that pain, recognizing that whatever caused that pain is from Allah, right? The things that happened are things that we have to get in come to terms with, that it's all part of La ilaha illallah. There is no source of anything happening other than Allah. And so this process of um, of revealing the self and exposing the self is getting underneath what that self-regulation exposes us to. And so rather than trying to have ourselves be that better Muslim at the end of the month that's doing more, it's being the broken human being that we are and bringing that directly to Allah in this very vulnerable, heart open place that's allowing the neediness that we have to be filled by Allah, not to be filled by or trying to fix by our own sense of what we think is better or our own way of manipulating our orientation to things so that it's more functioning or more matching our picture of what we should be, but actually allowing ourselves to be exactly as we are and bringing that to Allah allows for us to become who we potentially can be. You know, to go from what we are to what we can become requires that we are fully allowing ourselves to be as we are. And this is the paradox that a lot of people have a hard time centering in is in because we know that we're supposed to have tawakkul and give everything over to Allah, but then we have free will. And people, we have a hard time making sense of where do I stop in terms of my doing to try to become versus being in a place of stillness and being. And so the process of being present with what is becomes a fundamental part of our own development as human beings and as practitioners, and the work that we can do with clients to get them in touch with what's underneath the surface more. And so I'm just going to share um, a figure that I have. Some of you may have seen this. It's from my research, and it's called the iceberg model of Islamic psychotherapy. And this is one of the models and figures that we use within the Shifaa method to understand what this looks like in clinical practice. So some of you may be familiar with some of my other work with the model of the soul and how we understand the aql, nafs, qalb, and ruh in relationship to the ontology of the soul. But when we're looking at how do we access these deeper levels of the human being that are coming into the room with any client that comes to you? You know, most of us are trained in methods of therapy that deal with what's above the waterline in this case. So what the presenting problem comes in behavior patterns, it comes in relationship issues, it comes in physical markers of depression or anxiety. And then we're dealing with what's right underneath the surface, which is what are the cognitive structures and frameworks that have led to that behavior. And we may be dealing with emotions at a level just underneath that, that are the bubbling up of the emotions that come up. But the Prophet ﷺ said that the qalb is like a bubbling pot of water. And those bubbles that come to the surface are the reactions of the qalb to the fluctuation of the nafs. And so they're like little indicators of what's out of balance or covered over at a deeper spiritual level in the core, in the qalb. And so when we talk about Islamic psychology, there's a lot of reference to the qalb and the ruh. People recognize that, people see that as part of the ontological framework, but there's often very little of how do we actually deal with those aspects of the human being within the therapy room. Because when we get into the room, much of what we're trained and much of what people do is talk therapy. And so we can deal with what people are telling us and we can help reassess that narrative. And in trying to deal with that, we're trying to kind of regulate the self. And at the most, what that can do is help somebody cope. We can help them cope with the situation and get to a place that's better functioning. But from a truly Islamic paradigm, the the healthy human being or somebody with afia, well-being in full, isn't necessarily that they are better functioning in the dunya. It's that they're in submission to reality and that their heart is in submission to Allah in a place that it can be witnessing and recognizing its neediness. That is literally the highest state of wholeness of Islam, of being in submission, brings forth wholeness and peace. That doesn't mean that the removal of symptoms is necessarily going to happen, but that the person's heart is in submission. And in order to access the heart at this level, so here in the model, this keyhole is like saying that when we can unblock not just the cognitive constructs that are keeping this emotional block in place, but if we're getting at the actual spiritual blocks on the spiritual heart on a more subtle level within the body in the chest, we can actually open the heart to be able to be kind of accessing the wound so that it's opening and that you can look at it as like the remembrance of Allah coming actually into the wound Or you can look at it as that the trauma or the wound that was there is actually opening to be released and giving back to Allah to recognize its place. So it's almost like this visceral, multi-dimensional way of getting the integrated self into submission. And what happens oftentimes and what we're dealing with clients is that they have places where they've covered over their heart that we're trying to then help them deal with that place that covered over from that traumatic experience. And we're helping them by regulating and the thoughts and the behaviors. And somebody can essentially um, have better function, have more adaptive thoughts, and still have this closed off. Because if we don't have a way to access it, then we're sort of only dealing with parts of the whole. And so the way that we, in the Shifaa method, the way that we access it is by recognizing that the metaphysical heart has a physical location in the chest. Allah in the Quran says that do they not have hearts with which they reason? Like the heart has the ability to perceive, and it's not the eyes that go blind, but the heart's in the chest, right? And so this place is where a lot of the work needs to happen to unlock these deeper things that can be opened in bringing that vulnerability to Allah for there to be transformation, not by the technique, not by the method itself, not by the therapist saying the right thing or having the right list of things that are going to unlock the person's thoughts or beliefs about things, but actually that the heart to heart mirroring happens by the therapist, us, the practitioner, actually being in a state of having done their own work on their heart to expose and be vulnerable and remove the blocks in their heart, so that we're coming into this position of simply reflecting Allah's healing, recognizing that Allah is Ashafi, and that the transformation comes in submission to that power of healing that can be behind you. You know, if you walk into the room as a practitioner on your own, then you're only able to really help the person from what you have in your knowledge and your techniques and your skills and your state. But if you recognize from your miskeen, poor state that you are reliant on Allah and Allah is the one that does the healing, and you recognize that you are only and only ever will be Abd Ashafi, the servant of the healer, then you can have this mountain behind you that comes in and gives not from yourself, but from the ultimate power of everything that can actually come into the session. And so many people at this point will say like, well, I'm not, you know, as a practitioner, I'm not going to be at the state of having my heart in this pure place to be able to have that level of, you know, how can I think that Allah's healing is going to be able to come in through me? But the reality is that every one of us that has a heart has the ability, that heart has the ability to reflect reality. And even in your brokenness, and even in your not fully being self-developed, your sincerity, your ikhlas of you yourself coming in vulnerability and recognition that it is Allah is the healer, and not really trying to regulate your own self in your own way and be focused on what do I need to do and what do I need to say, right? We're back to doing. It's having the right formula. It's doing the right thing so I can behave in the right way. And that's focused too much on our self-reliance and our power, which we don't have as much as we think we do. And so when we dismantle that and we show up in our vulnerability and our neediness for Allah, then that we can become conduits of a much greater power of healing that's not just about regulation, it's about transformation. And that transformation can only really happen when there is this recognition that Allah is the one that we're aiming towards, that Allah is the one that created the whole scenario of both the client's problem and the fact that the client has come to you as a practitioner. So when we say, well, who am I to help this person? I don't have what it takes. The fact that Allah brought you together in this moment is ordained by the one who has the wisdom. And so you, even in your brokenness, in your underdeveloped spiritual capacity, all it requires is your recognition that Allah is the one that's doing the work and that you're being present, simply being present, even if you've had a lot going on in your own life, if you're able to be present in that moment and recognize that Allah is there, then your heart has the ability to fundamentally be a powerful conduit for Allah's transformative healing power for the other person. And so that requires a very different way of working that is not about technique. It's not about saying the right thing, but it's really about your being and your own self-development. And so even though you can and should show up as you are and recognize that Allah can use you as that conduit, at the same time, as practitioners, we have an ethical obligation to be working on our own self and working on our heart to be that potential mirroring. You know, the Prophet ﷺ reminds us that the believer is a mirror for the believer. And that mirroring is exactly this. We can mirror the healing that we're intending for this other person in front of us. And so with the Shifaa method, then, yes, I've developed all of this theory and I have all these models that talk about the depth of the ontology of the soul and we have the science of the soul from the Islamic tradition, but it's not that. The more knowledge that you have of the permutations of the ruh and the qalb is not what's going to help the other person. It's not your knowledge. It's your illumination of your heart that allows for that transmission and transformation to come through you. Because knowledge, as we know from the Quran, Allah, when He talks about ilm, He usually references nur, that there's this illumination that happens in the heart, and that illumination happens when the heart is purified. But that purification is not just about sin, it's about removing blockages from being able to be in direct witness of what your heart already witnesses. So it's just about coming back into and the reality of your ruh that has this ability to reflect through the qalb and purify the nafs. And so that all happens from being still and rather than trying to achieve something that you aren't yet, it's about remembering who you already are and allowing that to come forward, which requires the cultivation of a state of presence. Because what are you being present to? We first are being present to what's there, what's weighing on us, what's getting in the way of our heart from being able to reflect that, and not so much about how do I fix it and become better, that self-regulation, but actually the self-regulation of let me regulate my body and my thoughts and my nervous system to just come into a state of natural disposition, the fitra of your soul to be in a state of dhikr. And then that regulation of coming into presence allows for this exposure of what's really there. And it may be that we have things that are on our heart that are in the way, and then it gives us the opportunity to then open it and have that opening be a receiving and a giving. right? So when we open our hands, I'm like giving my pain to the one who's in control of it and wrapped in mercy and has the ability to take it away from me. And I'm opening to allow that reception and the nur to come in. And so there's a receptivity. And so this is why we have the Shifaa method. We have ways of even recognizing the process of change. So I've broken down in this saying, be with what is and be with Allah. We talk about it as a therapeutic arc, in that first you have to be present with what is to allow it to come to the surface, then exploring what is, getting deeper beneath the layers of the subtle reality of what's really there in the spiritual material in the qalb, because we are multidimensional beings, and the heart even has different levels to it. And then accepting what is, because it's part of this alignment with our aqidah of recognizing that everything is from Allah. We come from Allah, we return to Allah. And that through that acceptance, rather than trying to avoid and push away, but actually opening and accepting, that then transforming what is by bringing this divine presence into it. And so this is and then we have created a system of being able to, so how do you measure something like this? So much of it is unseen, right? And so it's not, but what we're able to measure and give clinicians evaluative feedback on is their competencies. So we have a system of evaluating people's competency on their heart-centered presence, their emergent process, their core wound awareness, and their ability to accept, bring people into acceptance through all these different tools, like working with traditional Islamic forms of muraqabah and tafakkur, as well as understanding the realm of the khayal and metaphor and the imaginal realm. And so there's all these different ways and techniques, but ultimately it comes down to the state of the practitioner's heart. And so a big part of the training in the Shifaa method is in us working on our own selves. And so it's not just doing role plays in how am I going to put this technique into practice with my clients, but I'm working on my own heart through that process. So I want to just share one more thing, and then we'll open it up to questions. But I just want to play this video just to give you a taste of the training, and then we can have questions about anything I talked about the soul and regulation, or the training itself, or the method itself. Bismillah.
It felt like this program had just been waiting for me. So if we were to locate the focus of the work in the Shifaa method, it's not up here, but it's very much here. So this method was developed out of the science of the soul. And what I found is that a lot of people resonate with this approach because it is something that is really trying to get at a natural way of working from the heart.
It's about healing yourself so that you can heal others. And the things that you learn, for me, they've felt so intuitive. But I never had the language or the understanding in order to frame them properly. It's complex in its simplicity. That's one of the magical things about the Shifaa method.
Here, when I'm practicing with another clinician, like I'm being as real as it gets, and so are they. You're experiencing the methodology in action on your own wounds, and there's an opportunity there.
It's only through going through this embodied experience that then all of that previous training and learning and studying and abstract theories and models and frameworks is integrated and makes sense, and it's something that they can actually use and bring forward. Through these trainings, not only are they becoming better practitioners, but they're becoming more fully who they are. And so it's not just information, it's transformation.
Okay. So there's information in the chat. Fatima is putting in if you're interested in this, but we can open it up for questions. I don't know we should just take hands, or if you wanna if there's questions in the chat.
There's quite a few questions in the chat. I can read out a few of them if it helps before we take some hands as well, if we have time, inshallah. Nora has asked, can you help me understand the Quranic verse, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves, with this method?
Yes, this is a very central part of this approach, is that it's understanding that. So one of the principles in the Shifaa method is that there is that self-development is fundamental. Like we are required to work on ourselves to change what is within ourselves. So it's not just about this transactional, Allah will change it, because in that ayah, it says Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. So it's saying Allah is the one who makes the change. Allah changes, but we are required to, within our locus of control, focus on what is within our control. And what is within our control is very small. It's very much on the interior. Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our state, and our intentions, and to some degree what we can do. And so it's very much about focusing on that self-awareness and internal work that we need to do to unveil, so like there's lots of things that we can do to put in our position to just be in states of ibadah, and Allah can choose to open us up and reveal at any moment. But meanwhile, we have our own our own will, and it's our job to submit that will and do the work to uncover. Should we take a hand from Osman?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair. It's an honor to be in your presence. I've been chatting with some of your students offline in different capacities to meet with you. So it's an honor to be sitting with you. My question is twofold. One is, you talked about vulnerability, in EFT, emotional focused therapy, vulnerability breeds vulnerability when working with two partners. And I'm getting the sense here that with the Shifaa method, that if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and expose and get deeper within the Qalb, that could perhaps help transfer to clients. Is that
Yes.
you're kind of saying, or am I missing it?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. However, often when we think of like vulnerability and sort of self-disclosure, when it's often talked about, it's like the nafs of the therapist coming into the therapeutic relationship. But here we're talking about and I'm not saying we can't bring our own nafs in our way of thinking and our own, but what's really what we're being vulnerable with in ourselves is on a level of the spiritual nature of our being that's actually coming forward and bringing it into the therapeutic relationship. So it's rather than saying I'm this like kind of distant person that I know that I'm a human being, but I'm gonna kind of like couch my human beingness and just be a conduit for us to talk about this other person's problem. It's actually using the reality of what makes me a human being, which is my heart, and that heart, that vulnerability of my heart being the actual thing that allows for transmission and transformation on a deeper level. And so what this means is that many times, like if you were to see me in a session, first of all, a lot of what I'm doing is not necessarily talking. Maybe there's a little talking at the beginning just to kind of frame what it is that the person is dealing with, and then I'm guiding them into where is that showing up in their body, and then trying to from the body locate it in the heart, and then trying to go through this process of opening to that reality. And what you may see on the outside is, okay, I'm guiding them, I'm saying certain things, and maybe if you were to write down what I'd say, you'd be able to also get them to the same place. But what I'm saying is less what's the power that's happening in the session, and more my own presence with my heart, but ultimately with Allah. And so that requires a vulnerability in a much different way, in that I'm using my spiritual nature and this open, vulnerable place of the spiritual heart, and bringing that into the session as the active mechanism in the therapeutic relationship. But that's just, usually when we're talking about vulnerability with bringing ourself into it, it's about our own emotions, our own thoughts, and that's not what it is. It's the spiritual state, and that's just something that often isn't talked about. Because even when we talk about, I briefly saw some comments about like ACT and different things that allow for emotions to come into it, or even spiritual orientation to come into it. Usually that's understood as beliefs, purpose, value. And that's all still cognitive frames. It's all, what do I believe in? What do I think about? What do I have emotions that are wrapped up in? But what we're talking about is the actual spiritual reality of the soul that has a visceral an energetic impact in when you're in presence with somebody. And yes, being in physical presence can have a great powerful effect, but it's our souls are not bound by material form and space and time in the same way that our bodies are, and so it still works online in a sense of the heart being heart to heart.
Jazakallah khair. That meant a lot. Barakallah feek.
وياك. Asad.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Abdullah. Alhamdulillah, and I really appreciate. Oh, can't see you. Can you see me still? Can you hear me? Okay, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I just it seems like I got kicked out, but I got back again.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Bismillah.
Okay, so Bismillah. Yeah, really, what I wanted to highlight, I guess, coming from an addictions background, and a lot of the clients that I do with, do have addictions issues. I guess there's like I can't lie, there's a little bit of a resistance in within me. With the work that I do, I'm always looking for behavior change, right? And from session to session, if behaviors aren't changing, then in the way that I do things, then there's a problem. There's something that needs to be looked at. I do incorporate spiritual elements into my practice as well. Like, mukhalafat al-nafs is a huge element of the work that I do. And this does seem like a more gentle approach, just the presence and accepting that, you come as you are, right? And you accept, the brokenness of the individual. And I think that's part of the process. But I guess I always see that as the beginning stage is the acceptance of who you are, acceptance of the brokenness, and then moving into the change. So maybe
Right.
speak on that a bit, inshallah.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good question. For sure. We need to change. We're meant to change. But the change and the change is only going to be transformative meaning that we're moving into a different state and moving through, you mentioned resistance, moving through resistance to move into something else rather than we can just focus on behavior and change the way that we're relating and change the outcome. And when you look at something like addiction, usually addiction is coming from there being a void on a deeper level, and that void is being filled with something. And so if we're only thinking about, okay, well, we want the addictive behavior to stop, and we want to usually we're going to replace it with some other addictive behavior that's just better, right? And it's more, but meanwhile, there's still some void that need for that behavior is filling. And so it's possible to skip over the need of filling that void by just replacing it with another behavioral conditioning. And so what that presence and dropping into what may seem like inactivity or just sort of complacency, it's not that, because that's not what the intention is. The intention is not to not have there be a different outcome, but that different outcome is we're having faith that there's a natural orientation. When we're oriented to our fitra, the fitra state of the human being is naturally healthy. Like it will naturally go towards what is good for it, and it will naturally, that involves behaviors. It involves acting in a certain way. It involves values. It involves moral right action and justice and all these things. But when we skip over the sort of heart-centered place that has forgotten and allow that to open and arise, then the new behavior can happen through the reorientation of the spiritual center rather than just covering it over through acting differently and then having this blockage in the heart still there. It was never accessed. You see what I'm saying?
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what might complicate it, at least for me, is the fact that sometimes clients are looking for that. They're looking for that change. They're like, "Hey, we're coming in session after session. What
Yes.
are you giving me?" So I guess that's another thing that, as a
Right.
clinician, kind of dealing with
But
that.
then, from my experience, it doesn't last. You can give them that change and then usually they come back, right? And so it's fine, but if we're really looking at healing on a level that's defined by the Islamic paradigm, and this doesn't even mean that it can only be with Muslims, nor does it mean that it has to be couched in Islamic theology, but the Islamic paradigm is such that the human being has a particular nature and that it is not limited to this world, that we have a prenatal existence and a post-mortem existence. And that's a reality for all human beings if we're looking in this Islamic paradigm and taking that seriously. And so then that means that real healing and wholeness would be that person who wants to behave differently. Really, we don't always know what's best for us. We know what we would prefer, but ultimately there's a hikmah in what's best for us, and that's going to be connecting the person with their deeper fitra of who they are, which is rooted in their ruh, not just their nafs. And often when we don't deal with the ontological framework that Islam presents us, and in practice, then we're left adopting an ontological framework that we've learned through secular society that's focused on outcome within this material world. And so this is where we can really be focused on behavior outcomes rather than connecting the person with their spiritual identity rather than their sort of nafs level identity. Alia?
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing some of these concepts that you've developed. I'm curious about how you address context with clients. So, the idea of I have to be purified or perfect before I approach Allah and communicate. Um, and sometimes I feel like that comes from shame-based or fear-based messages around their faith that they've grown up with or they're raised with, in addition to a capitalistic society that focuses on productivity and perfectionism. So how do you address that, when clients are coming in with these fear-based or shame-based beliefs about themselves and their relationship with Allah?
Yeah, great question. That this is, huge. I think first thing is this is why a lot of times people think Islamic psychology is talking about religion and theology and God in this like, okay, well, we have to bring that forward first. But even if we have clients that are Muslim and identify as Muslim, often we can't just assume that bringing Allah into the conversation is going to be this positive healing thing. For many Muslims, their relationship to Allah is the core of their trauma, or their relationship to the deen of Islam and their knowledge and understanding of who Allah is and their own relationship with Allah is there's trauma there that needs to be healed. And so the shame is something that comes from a misunderstanding and orientation to Allah that was filtered through Allah's creation rather than directly from Allah. And so a lot of the work that needs to happen. So one of the other principles in the Shifaa method is the mercy as a foundation, that you can't do any of this work without there being a foundation of mercy. So you can't work with a client in helping them discipline themselves or discipline their soul or come into this disciplinary reformation of the soul without being able to access mercy at a really fundamental soul level. And so that's going to have to come through the therapist emanating mercy. And that's going to only be possible if the therapist understands Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim and the reality of that endless ocean of mercy that Allah constantly reminds us and tells us that He is, that everything starts from mercy. And so shame can only be healed if the person is experiencing usually through another human being first, so that they can then fix and heal that guilt that's from shame and bring it to Allah, who is actually fundamentally, there is no shame with Allah because Allah sees everything, and all you have to do is turn to Allah and it's forgiven. But the person doesn't have on a real level, hasn't experienced that. They've heard about it, they've thought about it, maybe they've been told about it, but then their experience has been very different. And so it's having to open that feeling of shame and then have the real reality of mercy enter into that on a visceral energetic level. So that's where my heart as a practitioner would be witnessing the thing that the person has shame for, and then feeling from me that I completely accept them and that there's no shame, and this is how that healing has to happen. So it's, Allah is a reality, and we're dealing with an Islam, the Islamic paradigm, we're dealing with it as a reality, not in word alone, and oftentimes not in words at all, if it's not going to be what's helpful for the client. Hana.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Rothman, and to everybody else. It's such a blessing to have you here with us today, alhamdulillah. I've been kind of having a question similar to those before me, but going a little bit deeper with regards to complex trauma. clients of Muslim origin who are, having trouble, not necessarily with shame, but the idea of the why, right? And bridging that why with, inna ma'al usri yusra, verily comes with difficulty comes ease. But being so stuck in the difficulty part and not being able to kind of look beyond that, and look beyond to even see that there could be a light at the end of the tunnel for healing, and for themselves and for their experience and for acceptance and for clients that are, leaning towards ending their lives, right? And when we talk about, returning to the fitra and, building from the ground up, I sort of feel at a loss of where to start with these clients because some of them do come for, Islamic-based therapy or looking for a Muslim therapist, but at the time their relationship with their deen or their relationship with Allah is also very lost, right? And so when you're kind of digging to try to see where to start from that point, what would you kind of suggest in terms of rebuilding and creating that alignment when you're dealing with so many layers of the complex trauma of the loss in touch with Dean, of perhaps lack of support around you from either community or family? Where do you kind of dig into start picking up and start kind of layering and stacking on your own as a therapist?
Great question and a big question, multi-layered. First of all, like you mentioned, suicide. If somebody's suicidal, like this,
Is Dr. Abdullah still with us?
I think he dropped off. We know that he was having connection issues. Oh, here we are. He's back.
sorry about that. Kicked me out and brought me back in again. So, from an Islamic perspective, we would really, if it's suicide, like if somebody is suicidal to that degree, then the way of working with them is the same that we would learn in secular training, is that we deal with safety first, and we deal with getting them rooted in a connection to somebody in relationship, and dealing with, because the Islamic principle is we always preserve life. And so you wouldn't go into like all these esoteric things of meaning and trying to get them to understand that they need to their relationship with Allah and their will and their self accountability, because that's not going to be what's most relevant and the point. And so just like you would with somebody who is suicidal, getting them to like tell you about what their plan is and if they're going to act on that plan and then make a contract with them, what you're doing is you're grounding them in their nafs, jism orientation to remaining here in this world, like anchoring them, and then giving them a relationship of like, here, I'm going to check in on you. You have to promise me and contract with me. So there's this relationship. And so there's this communal aspect that in order to bring somebody back into kind of integrating all these different things, where, because we can get lost in trying to understand everything and not understanding and feeling the depth of pain and trauma, and it doesn't make sense. And we're out here trying to disconnect with the pain that we're feeling while trying to make sense of everything. And it's very outside of our locus of control. And so what you would be doing is bringing somebody in their locus of control by focusing on very simple things that are going to locate them in their body. So maybe even just getting them to do physical things, being in service to other people, so there's relationship connection. And then what you do is you start building the building blocks of reconstituting that ontological integrated framework, because we are a nafs, we have a jism. This is all integral. We have the aql, we have our way of thinking, and then we have the spiritual reality and the qalb that regulates that. Usually when people experience complex trauma, that all gets disintegrated and aggregated, and they can't pull it all together. And so therapy. So much more can be said on that, but I'll leave it there because I think we're at time.
Yes, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Abdallah. This was so informative. There's so much engagement and excitement, it sounds like, for everyone. I know that Fatima has been posting the link for the training, and I don't know if you guys want to share a little bit more. It sounds like there's a 25% off code available for those who attended this session for the Shifaa Method, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for your time. We at Ruh also wanted to share that we will be providing, in collaboration with Dr. Mariam Shaybani at Ma'ruf Commons, a workshop series on working with Muslim families, practical frameworks for Islamic law for clinicians. So this is more kind of not necessarily clinical intervention, but an idea of getting us grounded in a sense of, what does Islam, or what are the frameworks around different things around Islamic law when it comes to parenting adult children, when it comes to dealing with abuse within our communities or complex marital realities. The goal is not for you to become a scholar, it's just to be able to ground you, to have the language. In some ways, maybe in working with Muslim clients and us being Muslims ourselves, this may be kind of considered a type of, knowledge that we need to seek in order to continue to do this work, in the same way that Dr. Abdullah has been talking about, of also having that that self, that we're kind of aware of erasing that sense of self, and just to serve as mirrors for our clients, inshallah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Shafi. And inshallah, Ahmad, I don't know if you want to chime in. We've got a early bird just available for $199 until April 15. If you want to use an exclusive code here until March 18th, inshallah, you'll be able to get $20 off. And if the training is not satisfactory for you after the first session, you can register risk-free and only be charged for that first session that you attend. But Jazakumullah khair, everyone. I don't know, I think Dr. Abdullah might have dropped off again. I was going to invite him to have a brief dua for us, but if not, okay, I think here he is. Dr. Abdullah, I was wondering if you'd be open to just, reading a quick dua for us to wrap things up.
Yes. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya Allah, we ask you within these last precious days of this blessed month of Ramadan for you to open our hearts and to make us truly come into presence with bringing our hearts as vulnerable and open to you, Allah, that you know exactly what is in our hearts. You are in control of our intentions and our outcomes, and may we purify our intentions. May we be receptive to the sakina that you generously bring down in these last nights. In the last third of the night, may we be blessed to be able to witness the night of power. Ya Allah, we ask you to increase our ability to be conduits of healing for our clients and for our brothers and sisters and for everybody that we come in contact with. May all of the people suffering in the world at the hands of injustice and oppression be given peace and be given ease and be delivered from their oppressors. And may we all be in service of one another and bringing Allah, your justice into this world, and remembering that your justice is only fulfilled in the long term, in your wisdom, in your hikmah. And may we be reminded of that, and may we be grounded in service to you all along, witnessing that we are here by you, for you, and we return to you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you all for joining. I think there's links that have been sent out for the Shifaa method within the chat, but I believe there was also, if you sign up to continue, I don't know, Fatima, if you want to drop that link one more time. Yes. I thank you all for joining. We'll leave it on for a few minutes just to allow for the link to kind of be accessible to everyone.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. We appreciate your time.
جزاك الله خير دكتور عبد الله.